Hi everybody, welcome to another Dev Camp session. My name is Jorge Ramirez and I'm going to show you how to make a Meadow enclosure using Fusion 360. Now for those who don't know me, I'm one of the main content creators for Meadow projects on Hackster. I make cool, nice projects using different peripherals that may or may not contain on the HackKit Pro. Is just to show you how easy are to put all these peripherals together, wire them up, and you can see how it's all in C# and check all the nice APIs, all the clean solutions that you can make using Meadow Foundation. What I'm going to talk to you about in this session is actually creating, well, a Meadow enclosure. So we're gonna walk through these series of steps here to walk you through how to get into our end result. We first start doing designing the enclosure. Next up, going into more detail of dimensions and measuring how your end up product is going to look like. Finally, we end up going into Fusion 360, which is my go-to software to making 3D models for 3D printing. And I'm going to give you a little glimpse of how you would use a slicer software so you can create your final file where you would put it on your printer and start printing. So what are we making? Well, since I said at the beginning, we're going to make a Meadow enclosure for your dev kit, which is the one you see on the slide. It's just this little box here. Where you have your Meadow dev kit here, and you also have a little hole here so you can connect it via MicroUSB. Even though if your box is closed, you still are able to plug it in. We're gonna put a branding Meadow logo on the top, and so yeah, this will be the end result. Notice that in the inside of the box we have this. We have these little cubes that they're just gonna help you lift your Meadow dev kit in case you don't have those stand-up legs on the corners of the wooden board. So it'll make your dev kit, your Meadow sit nice and flat in the box. So the first step will be drawing your enclosure. You have to get a pen and paper and start drafting what is your end result, what you want to accomplish. So in this case, we want to make a little box for the Meadow enclosure. So I made here a representation of what you might end up making depending on your drawing skills. This is just a filter that I did for a sketch. It's actually the same box that I did, but it's just to give you a sense that, the first thing is just sit and visualize where you want to get at, what's going to be your end model. And then once you come up with your design, you now go into second step, which will be going into details. You have to measure and get all the dimensions right and start building your blueprint to make your whatever object or whatever model you want to do. In this case, it's our Meadow box. So notice I have the lid on the left side of the illustration, and on the right side I have the base of the box, the contents. You'll see all these measurements are expressed in millimeters, and I'll show you on Fusion 360 how to build it up from scratch. And we'll take in consideration all these different measurements that we have expressed here in the diagram. So yeah, step 3, let's all make it in Fusion 360. So let's just get to it. I'm going to transition here to my other screen. There you go. You should see now the screen for Fusion 360. It's modeling software by AutoCAD. You can there's also a free version. It's a personal, not for commercial use version that you can download, and you can just take advantage of all their different features that they provide. And it's actually a really great tool. I have been very new using the software, so I'll try to be as simple and explain it as clearly as I can. I'm sure there are other ways of things that I might be doing that could be faster and more efficient. I am relatively new, so I'll just show you how I came up about building this box from the start. So the beginning of this landing page on Fusion 360, it's the structure of the project. It's based on components. Right now, in the brand new project, you'll have one component. It's expressed in this white icon here, but then you can also create subcomponents inside, which in this case is perfect what we're going to do, because we are going to create two components or two parts for this project. Will be one for the lid and the other one will be for the base of the box. So let's start putting together the base of the box. So we're going to right click here on the unsaved main component. We click new component and we're going to name this one base. Click there, click type base here. Perfect. So underneath this node or of a component is where we're going to do all the different things to put the base box together. So right now it's empty. So the way we start making this object is by using sketches, which are special guidelines that on sheets of paper or diagrams that we're gonna put down to the measurements or the dimensions of our object, and then we're gonna start extruding these shapes so we can finally get into our end result. So let me show you from the beginning. So we're gonna create a new sketch. So we click here, and notice that you can first select on which plane do you want to make this first sketch. So I'm gonna select the Z component, and this will be the first sketch that we're gonna make. So the first thing that we're gonna do is building the base or the floor of your box. So we're gonna press S here, and we're gonna look for center rectangle, and then we click the origin so our box remains nice and centered, and we're gonna make this 100 by 100 millimeters like that. And now that is our first sketch, which will be for the floor of our box. So we click finish sketch, and now that we have our square 100 by 100, we're going to use this feature. It's the one that I've used most, the extrude function, and we select our sketch, which is our 100 by 100 square, and then we're going to extrude this. We're going to pull it up to start creating volume, right? And we're going to pull this up 18 millimeters. Great. So now what we have is 100 by 100 by 18 millimeter box of solid PLA plastic filament. So right now that's good, but we need to make to make it hollow so we can fit the Meadow inside. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create another sketch, and this sketch won't be against any of these planes. We're gonna select one on the top face or the top side of the cube that we just made here, the box. So we selected, we go back into top view, and we're now going to create two rectangles, and I'll explain why. So we're gonna create one that'll be 96 by 96 millimeters, and then we're gonna create another one, another rectangle, and that one will be 94 by 94 millimeters. All right, why did I need to create two squares? Well, because the box, you'll see that we have an inner border here that is going to help us do. It'll help us make the sealing, to make the seal with the lid, so the box can be firmly closed. So bear with me, and I'll show you how we're gonna do this. So we added those two squares. One's 94 by 94, the other one's 96 by 96, and we click Finish Sketch. We're back into our volume construction view, and now we're going to select our extrude function. We're going to select the square that is inside, and we're going to extrude this down by 16 millimeters, like that. Now notice it's not going to go completely down because we want the actual, we don't want to go completely, we don't want to remove the floor of the box. So it'll be 2 millimeter thickness. We extruded up 18 millimeters, we're extruding down 16. So it'll be only 2 millimeters of thickness, which is, it works okay. So let's click OK here. And there we go. Now we have our box. It's hollow now, with a 2 millimeter thickness on the bottom, and there's 3 millimeter thickness on each side of the wall, on the walls of the box. Perfect. So let's do, the next step that we're gonna do is add the support cubes for your dev kit, your Meadow dev kit. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna create another sketch. And notice how we can create sketch for each side of the box or the object that we're creating. In this case, we want to extrude up those cubes that we're going to have on the center and the inside of the box. So we have to select a sketch for the inside of the box. So we select that. And now we can also hide the body if we want. If it's extruding our view, I'm going to hide it. And this is the lower floor of the contents of the box. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create 4 triangles. We're going to create and they're all going to be 6 by 6 millimeters. We got one there, 6 by 6 millimeters, 6 by 6. Perfect. We have our square 6 by 6 in all sides, but now we need is to properly align them. Like 3D printing here has to be very precise. So you have to use, I'm gonna show you how to use constraints. So you don't want to eyeball these things. You want to do constraints or relationships between objects or edges, so everything is very nicely aligned and very precise, because once you're starting printing, you have to see that everything is where it should be. So what we're going to do is I want to align the center of this cube with this middle axis here, which is the y-axis, which will be the middle part here of the box. So to do that, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. I'm going to create a line, but this line will be a construction line. It'll help you. It's a construction line is just like a guideline that you want to do some kind of relationship or a constraint to align it somehow, but you don't want it to be selectable for extruding or doing anything to manipulate or change your body, your 3D object. So I'm going to create a construction line here that is going to be this vertical line here. And then we're also going to add construction lines for this axis here. Here we go. We also need to put one vertically for the lower square and these horizontal ones, because we want to align this construction line that's horizontal with the horizontal axis which is that X, the X axis. So perfect. Now we have all our construction line. Let's turn the construction line off. Let's click the select view, the select function. We go in, zoom in a bit, and we're going to use the collinear function. Now this will help you when you select two edges. They're both going to align with each other. So say if I want to align this line here with the axis, you click both, and there you go. You have aligned both of these construction lines together, and now it's all nice and centered. Now if you want to align, now we want to align this edge there of the cube all the way to the edge of the square. So we're going to select here, and we select this part here on the edge of the box. There we go. So we got the top square all nice and aligned inside the inside of the box. Let's do that for the rest. So I select this vertical construction line with the X axis, and then we're gonna select this right edge of the square with the right border of the box. And now we're going to do it for the left side, like that, and then these edges here. And now we have to select the vertical one with the y-axis, and then this edge here, the one on the bottom. There we go. So we have all our squares nicely aligned and placed where we want them. So now we click Finish Sketch. We show the body again if we want. And now we go back into using our extrude function. And now we select all these cubes that we just drew. And now we're just going to extrude them up by 6 millimeters. 6 millimeters. There you go. So now you have all 4 cubes there. They'll help you to support your Meadow dev kit inside the box. So if you don't have any standout legs, it'll be perfect. It'll just keep it leveled inside the box. So that's it. So we have the cubes for now. Now I'm going to move on, and I'm going to show you how to make the ceiling border here of the box, which will make contact with the lid so they both close like this. So for that, we're gonna go back into our sketches. We're gonna show the second sketch that we did, which it had the squares in the middle, and we're gonna use the extruder function, and we're gonna select the square that is the outer one, that is in between the 94 by 94 square with the 96 by 96. And then that one, we're going to extrude it up 5 millimeters, sorry. Perfect. There you go, cool. So in my iterations, I noticed that when I do that border there like that, it's completely perpendicular and straight. When I wanted to close the lid, it's really hard to try to get all corners to align and fit, and then push it all inside so it makes a good seal. 5 millimeters is kind of a lot to make that sealing, so it's kind of also really hard to do the separation. So I ended up doing something called chamfer, which is like cut the borders a bit so it's easier to place the lid inside, and also it won't be as a tight fit as you would if you would leave it like this. So we're gonna use the chamfer function. I don't know if you pronounce it chamfer, but yeah, this one. So notice how you select one edge, and then you can just cut it up to a certain angle to try to make that edge less sharp, if I guess to say. So let's select the chamfer, and we're gonna select all the outer edges of our border that we just extruded. There we go. And now on chamfer type, we're gonna use distance and angle, because we want to, I'm gonna get a better angle here. So we want the distance to be 1 millimeter, but this is not enough. We want it to be the angle to be a little bit higher. So let's put 75 degrees. There we go. So that way it'll be much easier to fit your lid inside of all the edges of that ceiling, and then once you push them inside, the lid will make contact with the outer edge here, and then that will make a nice ceiling box, so it won't, you know, it won't open in your backpack or wherever, if you're carrying it or anything like that. It won't open easily. So we click OK here. So we have a nice border for the lid. Now the next step is we're gonna make a hole for the micro USB connector, which is something that we need to add here. There you go. So let's go add that hole there. So it's gonna look for the front view. I'm looking at the cube up here. Gives me a sense of where I am. And we're gonna create a sketch from the inside of the box. So we create a sketch there. We're gonna need to hide the visibility of the body, so we can see through the walls and see what we're gonna do. And we're going to create another rectangle here. And this rectangle is gonna be 11 millimeters by 13 millimeters. It'll look something like that. And we want that rectangle to be all the way into the top of our border here. So we have to use our collinear tool, and we're gonna say the top side of this rectangle, we want it to be on the top edge of our body here, and then we select it, and that's now all the way into the top. But now we also want some distance, because we want to align it with our micro USB connector. So we have to use the sketch dimension feature, which we select right now. We select one side of our rectangle along with the edge of where we want to keep a distance. And then here we're going to select 11 millimeters. Like that. Perfect. There you go. So now we have the sketch for the hole that we want to make. So we click Finish Sketch. Let's show the body again. And we want to show all the sketches. And there's our hole. So I'm going to hide the other ones just to keep the one that I'm working with. And now we're going to use the extruder. And we're going to select the rectangle that we just did. But notice if we're extruding up, we're going to create volume. We don't want to do that. We want to go 3 millimeters to the back, so it'll just create the hole that we want. There we go. 3 millimeters, and that's it. We have the hole for the micro USB for your dev kit. Pretty cool. Now another nice touch that I also learned is when you print something like this, you'll see I have these edges on the box, so they're not very comfortable to hold. So what we can do is when we click on the fillet function, we can also soften or round the corners of our object. So we can select, let's select all these edges here of the box. There we go. And now we let's say I always put 2 millimeters. There we go. And now you can see how the borders of your box are now all rounded and nicely. It's more comfortable to hold. So yeah, so that's it. That's basically all the steps that you needed to do to make your enclosure, at least for the base. Now let's move on to make the lid, which is much simpler. Let's start right now. We're gonna right click. I think it might be a good idea to save this, so I'm gonna save it right now. Let's call this demo box. Save. Perfect. And now let's right click on the root of your component tree and create a new component. And here, this is the new component. We click lid. We name it lid. And let's hide all the base stuff that we did, because we're now focused on doing the lid. Oh, I haven't explained. To rotate the camera, normally what I would do is you have your wheel key. If you press it, you can pan your view like this. If you move the wheel of your mouse up and down, it'll help to the zooming. And if you press shift at the same time of your wheel on your wheel button or your mouse, it'll, when you drag it, you'll move. You can rotate the camera however you like. All right. So now let's start doing your lid. So let's start again, and we're gonna create another sketch starting from the Z-axis. And the way we're gonna make the lid is a little different than the base, because we don't want, since this box has a Meadow logo on it, we want this part to be the last thing that the printer is gonna extrude, is gonna print in the end. So we're gonna make it print first the walls, and then after it starts printing all the walls, it'll start going through corner by corner, and it'll start building your top wall. And once it reaches a certain level, it's finally going to start printing the Meadow logo on the top. Since if we do it if we do it like this, it'll be harder for the printer to make this box, because the first thing that will make contact or it will start printing is actually the Meadow logo, which is sticking out. And after it's finished printing the Meadow logo, it's going to need to make some support to build the rest of the top side of the box, and then proceed on making the walls, which is not ideal. It's better to just start making the walls and then make the make the top lid in the end. Okay, so we have our top sketch all set up here, and we're gonna create another center rectangle, and this one's gonna be another 100 by 100, like we did on the base. And then we are going to create another rectangle here. And this one will be 96 by 96. Again, we're going to make the walls first. So we're going to have to extrude up both squares, and then we're going to select the inside square that we did, and we're going to extrude it down to make it hollow. I'll show you right now. So once we got our squares done, we're going to use the extrude function here, and we're going to select both shapes, and we're going to extrude that up 15 millimeters like that. Perfect. So now you have another 100 by 100 and 15 millimeter box, solid plastic. So now we need to make it hollow. So the way I do it is, let's show the sketch. and we're gonna have to extrude it from the bottom. Right now, if I use the extruder function, I can't select it from where I am because the body is right on top. I can't select it, so I need to go underneath. I select the inner square, and then we're going to extrude that up by 13 millimeters. There you go. So notice it indicates red that it's going to be hollow. We're not creating volume, we're removing volume. Click OK. And there you go. You have now a nice hollow box that will help us for the lid. And it's going to be 2 millimeters thick on both the lid and the walls on this box. Right? So now let's make the other part for the micro USB connector. You notice that I have a little connector here, like a little hole here that I made for the connector, just to add a little bit of complexity. So I can show you. If I close this, see how some connectors might be bigger than others, so I'm trying to be a little generous, and I needed to make a little bit this hole here on the lid for the USB connector. All right, so let's build that right now. There are many ways. This is basically how I did it. So let's go back, pointing into the front, from the front view on the bottom, because we want to make the hole around here. So we're going to create another sketch, and we're going to select the inside of the box. We select it. Now again, let's hide the body so I can see where I am. And now we're going to create another rectangle. It's going to be 2 millimeters height and 13 millimeters wide. There you go. And now notice the top side is going to be the lid. The bottom is going to be the bottom of where the other part of the hole will be. So we need to align this rectangle with the bottom. And now we're going to use the sketch dimension, and we're going to select the right side of our little hole, and we're going to select the right side of the inside of the box, and we're going to add a distance here of 12 millimeters. The other one was 11 because the walls were 3 millimeters thick. This one's 2 millimeters, so I needed to add 1 millimeter to compensate. So now they're both gonna align up nicely. Let's click the finish sketch, and let's show the body here. So we have our lid, and we have the sketch of where we're gonna make a hole. So now let's use the extrude feature here. We're gonna select this rectangle, and we're going to extrude that back 2 millimeters. As I said, this is 2 millimeters thick, so that's all we need to complete and make the hole for the USB connector. There you go. Nice. See, it's pretty simple. Let's go back and let's add something really fun. Let's add our Meadow logo here. So for adding logos and shapes, is normally what you would normally get is a vectorized image, because you obviously rasterize images. I don't believe it's gonna work. You need basic shapes that are nicely vectorized, and then we import them, and you'll be able to select these shapes so you can extrude them. So let's add an image. So you click here on insert, and you click on the insert SVG, and it will open this insert SVG window, and then you click on the folder, and then here I'm gonna select the Meadow logo bookmark, And now I don't see the image anywhere. It's because Fusion is asking you to select on which face do you want to place that image. In our case, we want to select the top face. There you go. So now we see our Meadow logo there. We might need to do a little adjustment here. So let's rotate this and let's try to center it. There you go. I think that looks nice. And that's it. You click OK. We click Finish Sketch. And now that we have our Meadow logo here nicely marked in our lid, what's left is to just extrude it up. Just maybe 6 millimeters, half a millimeter. You don't want it to be too tall because it'll be awkward to hold. So let's use the extruder function again, and we're going to select all the pieces of the Meadow logo. We're selecting the trees. Now we select the mountains. This circle here. And that's it. You have selected all the logo, and then we're going to extrude it up by 0.6 millimeters. There you go. You can extrude it as you know, whatever level you want. My printer is a Ender 3 Pro, and it goes on. It increases the levels of extruding by 0.2 millimeters. So by 3 passes on the logo, it'll be 0.6. So I'm just leaving it to be less than a millimeter, but also a comfortable. After 3 passes, you'll see that the logo will be at a nice, comfortable level. All right, so we have our Meadow logo here, and the last step that we have to do now is let's soften the corners here of our box, so it'll match with the base box that we did. So for that, we're going to use the fillet function again, and we're going to select all these edges here, the ones on the top and the corners. Oh, I got this one wrong. Hold up. This one. There we go. We have to make sure we're selecting the right edges. And now we put 2 millimeters. And there you go. We got our lid part of the box ready to go. And if I show both of the bodies of the base and the lid, you'll see how you'll see they're both like one inside the other, but what I wanted to show you is how the MicroUSB connector aligns up nicely, which is what we really want. And they're also in the same direction. They're square, so you can make the holes on the boxes on whatever side you want. I'm just nitpicky, and I just want to make sure that it's on the same size. Okay, so that's all there is to it to make the boxes on Fusion 360. The next step will be the slicing process, which I'll just walk you through very briefly how the slicing process is. It's basically the slicer software. What it does is it'll grab your 3D object and it'll cut it, or it'll slice it in smaller pieces, and it'll establish a path for your 3D printer. So that way the little nozzle of your 3D printer will know the path that it's going to take and end up printing your box. I'm going to show you that right now. So if we go back here, we select the lid and the activate component here. We right click the body one that was generated for our box, and we click the save as STL. That's a file that the slicer understands, and it'll start doing all the slicing process and exporting it for the printer. Right now I'm selecting the application. I'm selecting Cura, which is one of the popular slicing softwares out there. I'm gonna select that for now, and just click next here, and it will start opening Cura once it's done. Right, should open anytime soon. There you go. Okay, so we have Cura open here. I have a pre-selected configuration for the printer that you own. In this case, I own the Creality Ender 3 Pro, and this grid here is a representation of the maximum real estate that I have on my bed on the 3D printer where I can print. And you'll see that the box is nice and centered. And now for this one, you can rotate it and you can see that it's all nice and good. And then you click the slice button, and that's what it does. It'll just process your object, and it'll establish a path for your printer to start printing it. And it'll give you here an estimate of how long it'll take to print, which in this case will be almost 7 hours. It'll take 59 grams and also 19.73 meters. So what it's referring is to how much of this, which is kind of like will be the ink for your 3D printer, is just filament. It's called PLA filament. It's just plastic that it melts, and it'll start it'll start going through the bed and start making your object. So we'll use 59 grams and almost 20 meters of this filament to create your box, at least for the base. And you can also even you can preview it. You click preview, and this is how it's going to look like once it's done printing. I use notice that it has extra plastic around here. It's basically what is called a raft. I want to make sure that my object has a nice firm addition, or the object sticks very firmly to the bed of the printer, so it does an extra layer that is larger than the actual object. So make sure that your object doesn't warp or in mid print it'll unstick, and it'll start creating a mess and you'll have to start over. So I always end up using Raft to make sure that my object is nicely placed and properly stick into the bed, and I don't have those problems. It just takes a little bit longer, but once it's printed, you can even unstick that Raft and rip it from the base of your whatever you're printing. So you can also see here with this scrub here, you can on the slider you can see how the path that the extruder is going to start printing. So this one, you'll see how it's going to start printing. It'll first start going through the sides, and then it'll start going and making your first layer, which will be the raft. And then as you go up into the levels, it'll start creating more and more. This is now starting to create the base floor of your box. And then it'll start moving on to making your walls with the cubes that they're going to support your Meadow. And notice how, if we go here closely, you see that they has this pattern. It's because we're selecting an infill density of 20%. I don't need it to be 100%. I don't want it to melt or use a lot of filament to make this super firm. So just 20% will do it, and it'll have an infill pattern, which in this case is using a cubic. So it'll start creating patterns of little cubes, so it's all equal distance, and it won't use as much filament for making solids like this. So once it starts going up, at one point at 6 millimeters, it stops making these support cubes, and it'll start going up. And then there's a point where it closes that pattern of infill that it has, and it starts moving into getting your border for the lid. And that's it. That's all there is to it. It takes around almost 7 hours. It takes a while to print. But let's go back, and I'm going to show you how the lid would look. So let's go back to Fusion 360. Now let's activate this component for the lid. Let's show it. We hide the base one, and now we're gonna select, right click the body. We're gonna same process, save as STL. We select here. We select Cura, click OK. And now let's wait for a bit to open Ultimaker Cura. There we go. Now it opened, and now you can see, as I mentioned before, it's starting to print, starting from the walls, going its way up, and then start throwing layers on top between the walls, start building that last piece of, thick 2 millimeter layer on top. And once it gets that 2 millimeter thickness, then it starts doing the last pass, which will be printing the Meadow logo on the top. So we can let's check it out how it looks. So we click the slicer button here. This won't take 5 hours and 40 minutes. Around 50 grams, almost 17 meters of filament. Let's click preview here, and this is how it's gonna look. So yeah, so we'll have a raft, same configuration that I showed you before. Notice it's even hollow here because it's the only thing that is gonna need to stick into the bed is actually the walls. So the raft is smart enough to not create a whole layer of material. It will just do it under a certain distance of whatever pieces of the object is stuck to the bed. And let's see it printing from the start. So if we go down here, there's your first layer, which will be the raft. And then I think it creates a couple more. Yeah. And then it starts building the walls of the lid. Notice here that it's starting to go back and forth because of the hole for the MicroUSB connector. And then once it reaches a certain altitude, it'll start doing the entire loop around. And then this one will reach a certain point where it's going to throw one layer of filament from corner to corner on like in a 45 angle to one side to the other. And then it'll do, and the other side, it'll go perpendicular, and it'll start going to different patterns, and it reaches a point where it will start drawing your Meadow logo here. Should be the last part it'll print. There you go. So yeah, so after you slice it, you click the Save to File button here, and then you export that image. It'll generate a file, it's called a G code, and that you can either, if you have your printer already connected to computer, you can already make it, print by exporting that file directly through computer, or you can just print it into a micro USB connector, a micro SD card, and then you connect that into your printer and it'll start printing. So yeah, let's go back into our slides. And that's it. That's pretty much what I wanted to talk to you about. I hope you found this this tutorial about how to make a 3D object, a Meadow enclosure using Fusion 360. I hope you learned something. This is I hope all these sessions, they'll be available later on online, so you'll be able to, if there are things that you didn't quite get, you can also always replay it and try to see and follow along if you wish to create your own Meadow box. So yeah, so feel free to look me up. My handle or my username is Jorge Devs. You can follow me on Hackster, on GitHub. I have a Twitter account or Instagram where I show some images of projects, or I announce whenever I have projects published onto Hackster, so you can start building them and following along and having fun with Meadow. All right, thank you very much.